Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN Weekly for Saturday, June 20th, 2020. And our top story today, theaters begin to reopen around the country. And joining me now to discuss this is Natalie Walters. She's a business journalist with the Dallas Morning News. Natalie, welcome back to the program. Good to have you this morning.
Thank you. It's good to be back. It's been a while.
It has been a while, but it's great to see you. And you are now working for the Dallas Morning News during this summer as an intern, as a business reporter. But a lot's going on in the state of Texas, in the city of Dallas. Like other parts of the country, things are reopening. And I know that one of the areas that you wanted to talk about was movie theaters, because AMC and other theaters are beginning to reopen in the Dallas area. What can you tell us?
Right. So there's been a lot of talk with Texas because we're actually number 6 right now in terms of number of cases. We've sort of been a hot spot over the past few weeks, along with a few other states. But Cinemark is opening its theaters this week in Texas. It has about 660 theaters in the US, and it's starting to reopen theaters just in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's going to reopen 5 starting June 19th, so this week. And it's going to have $5 tickets for adults, $3 tickets for children and seniors. And it's going to start by showing traditional classic movies from its library, so no new movies. And concessions will be at a lower price too. It's trying to entice people out of their homes to say, come see our updated safety measures. And then hopefully they'll be pleased with those safety measures, go home and tell their friends, hey, it is safe. You should go check it out, and they'll come too. And they're hoping, these first few weeks, like I said, will get people comfortable. So by the time new releases come in July, the first one being Unhinged in early July, the big one being Christopher Nolan's Tenet on July 17th, people will feel more comfortable coming out. And then we've got the live action Mulan, July 24th. But, it is hard to say how people will respond, especially with the spike in cases in Texas. And then AMC, which is the largest theater chain in the world, is going to start reopening in July. They didn't give a specific date, but they're going to start their reopening in July because they said they want to be reopened in time for Christopher Nolan's Tenet, July 17th. So everyone's trying to get ready for Tenet. Everyone wants those box office sales to try to make up for 2 months of closures. Some businesses were able to get some sales online. Theaters had zero revenue for about 2 months, basically, and that's a huge hit. And because earnings for the first quarter only go through March 31st, we really aren't seeing the full damage that happened with the closings, because we really only got 1 or 2 weeks closings in that first quarter financial. So it'll really be the second quarter where we see how bad they were hit.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, obviously places where people congregate, bars, restaurants, theaters, sporting events, all hit hard. I'm wondering, Natalie, and I'm, commend AMC and the other theaters for opening up. I'm wondering, have you heard about what some of these safety measures will be? Because and I haven't been to a movie theater in a long time, but my recollection is there's a lot of stadium seating. People sit next to each other. I'm imagining with social distancing, they'll have to spread apart, so they probably won't be selling as many tickets.
Right. So for Texas, they'll have to be at 50% capacity, at least by the rules that are in place now for entertainment venues, which they're considered. And Cinemark said we can still be profitable at 50%. And, some of the new measures that will be in place are when you buy a ticket online, it'll automatically be socially distanced. They're only allowing tickets to be sold that are spaced out online. And then when you go to the theater, they're going to clean the theater after each showing. And, there's going to be hand sanitizing stations. You aren't required to wear a mask, but all the employees will wear a mask. And another thing they're doing is, before, if you bought a ticket online, you had to pick up a print ticket once you got to the theater. But now you can actually use your phone to be scanned. So there's just less, high contact spaces. And there's an interesting survey out that showed if you ask people, are you willing to return to theaters? People are really hesitant about that. But when you say, are you willing to return to theaters if appropriate sanitation measures are in place, it shoots up to about 75% of people who say, I'm fairly likely or highly likely to do that. So that is a good indicator of maybe people, there's a pent up demand to get out of the house and to have an activity that feels somewhat normal.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. I think people are now assessing whether it's the risk versus the reward. We've been kind of bottled up for 3 months in a lot of places. I'm in the Northeast, as you know, and we've been bottled up here. So I think people want to get out. One thing that I think is really interesting, Natalie, in terms of the movie theaters open up, is the people that were hit the hardest is usually the staff, the people that greet you, the people that give you a ticket, the concessionaires. Will I be able to get my Raisinets if I were to be able to walk in? Those are my favorite chocolates. So would I be able to get my Raisinets and bring, or would I have to still bring my own food? Do you have a feeling for that?
So they're still going to have concessions open, but it's going to be limited. They want it to be, these companies are really having to cut costs everywhere they can.
Hmm.
So they're going to open at their optimal hours, um, and try to use the least amount of staff they can at first, and then as demand rises, they'll pick back up on, rehiring staff. I believe Cinemark laid off 17,000 employees,
Wow.
because it was all shut down. So they said they're going to have some sessions, but it's going to be limited to the least labor intensive. So they don't need to have put as many employees in danger, or they can also keep their costs low.
Sure.
So you may I don't know about Raisinets. I'm not sure if they're included in that. But that's
I
fairly
know.
labor intensive to grab a box of Raisinets. So maybe that'll be there.
Yeah, Raisinets and popcorn. I mean, that's a favorite. Last question, Natalie. I mean, obviously, summer movies. Summer is a big time of year for new movies. I think I read that James Bond was put off, the new James Bond film. I think Top Gun, I think, was pushed out to December. Hollywood really is impacted. I know that you're focused on the Dallas area, but Hollywood also significantly impacted by this as well, because you can't film movies, or at least you couldn't up until maybe a couple weeks ago as things were reopening. But getting movies out and being able to push movies to people and get people to see what's being filmed and getting profit, those organizations as well have been hit.
Yeah, absolutely. The US box office saw a 600 million year-over-year decline, or about 25%, and that's only through
Wow.
the end of March, like we said. I mean, it's going to be a lot worse for the second quarter. That was only including about 2 weeks of closures. And to get a feel of what it might look like for the second quarter, the box office across Asia Pacific saw an 88% year-over-year dip. And so, for them, they were more in the height of their cases during the first quarter.
Hmm.
So that's, I think, more indicative of what it will look like for the second quarter. But there's a ton of openings coming for this year and next year. I have a list here, but we have, like I said, Mulan. We have A Quiet Place Part 2 with John Krasinski's SpongeBob SquarePants film. We have Wonder Woman 1984, Black Widow, James Bond, No Time to Die, Steven Spielberg musical West Side Story. And then next year it's just packed: Avatar 2, The Batman, Spider-Man 3, Jurassic World Dominion, The Matrix, um, another installment of Mission Impossible, and another installment of Fast and Furious. So there are a ton of movies coming. If they can do a good job with safety measures and getting people to feel comfortable coming, then maybe there's a way to recover in the next two years or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it looks like it's going to be interesting times as people go back. They go back to work. They go back to traditional things like movies and sporting events over time. And this thing changes day to day, as you seem to indicate that cases are spiking in certain parts of the country, in Texas, South Carolina, Florida, other places, and we have to be prepared for dealing with that. Well, Natalie, it's always a pleasure chatting with you, and thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning. Stay safe, and we will talk to you very soon.
Thank you. So good to talk to you. Have a good week.
Thanks, Natalie. Great to see you. Thanks for sharing your perspective. And when we come back, we'll take a look at the best segments for the week. Stay tuned right here on BRN Weekly. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
The windows on our homes, they protect us and the ones we love, but they do much more. At Renewal by Andersen, making your home more comfortable is at the center of every window we make. It's why we custom build our windows in America and install them in as little as 1 day. It's why we build our frames with exclusive Fibrex composite material that's 2 times stronger than vinyl. It's why our glass helps keep your home warmer in winter, cooler in summer, and quieter all year long. It's why we stand behind every window with a 20-year limited warranty. Why not help lower your energy costs while giving your home and family the best? Call 1-800-835-6525 to schedule a free in-home consultation. Buy one, get one at 40% off with this special offer. Plus, get special financing with no money down, no monthly payments, and no interest for 1 full year. Renewal by Andersen, the better way to a better window. Call 1-800-835-6525 now.
Welcome back. On Monday, I sat down with AAA's Jeanette Castellano to discuss how travelers can prepare themselves for a return to the road. Let's take a look.
And there's some key items you're going to want to add to that. Right, so we all already have our face coverings, so add that one to it. Gloves, if you don't have gloves, plastic bags, cleaning supplies, disinfectant wipes, hand sanitizers, and a thermometer. Those 4 things are definitely things to add to your packing list and to consider before you hit the road. You're going to want them no matter where you're going. Things are open. You need to do your research ahead of time. Not necessarily all rest stops are open, but along your route, you're going to find gas stations or fast food restaurants that are open and welcome you. I just myself came back from a road trip between DC and South Carolina. We stopped one time on both ways, but we did find, a fast food restaurant and a gas station that we were able to go to. Now, when you stop at these places, especially a gas station or a rest stop, you're going to want to touch as little as possible. And understanding that's easier said than done, but if you have gloves, definitely put those on. If you don't have gloves, use a plastic bag. Whether that's a Ziploc bag or one you find from your grocery station, and just put your hands in there so you're limiting what you're touching with your own fingers, and the bags are kind of a barrier for you. And of course, throw those out when you get back in the car. Use those disinfectant wipes to, again, hand sanitize, or if you have hand sanitizer. And when you're filling up the gas station, again, use that plastic bag to touch the pump, to touch the screen. Just another layer or another barrier between you and any germs you may be picking up. While these theme parks are opening, it's not the open that we are so used to. It's important to, again, go to Disney's website, go to the other theme park websites, understand what restrictions they have in place. A lot of the theme parks are limiting capacity. So, there's not going to be thousands of people there. And depending on where they are, it could be 25, 30% capacity that it's open to. So reservations are important. Are those places taking reservations? You need to know that ahead of time. The last thing you want to do is get excited for a big day at a theme park, get there and you're not allowed in because you don't have the reservation. And then once you are on site, there's going to be a lot of social distancing. There's going to be not necessarily all food shops and vendors will be open too. So just like if you were going out to your own, local stores, not everything's open. And there's still the importance for social distancing, and you've got to keep that in mind when you are traveling. And these theme parks too, they've got also the protocols in place in terms of wearing face coverings and things like that. Reopening is not one size fits all, and it really varies depending not just on state to state, but different localities within states. Family friends of ours just went to their summer home in Maine, and they learned that before they got there that they were going to have to quarantine for 2 weeks for that specific small locality in Maine. So again, like we've said before, research is more important. This isn't a one size fit all. You need to understand what rules and regulations and protocols are in place for the different localities that you're traveling to, and if that's going to impact you when you're traveling there or when you're returning home. Yeah, definitely. We're seeing our online bookings starting to increase, albeit modest, but that's promising, and we're excited because that shows us that people are ready to get out and travel when it's safe or when they feel comfortable traveling. We typically have a Memorial Day or Independence Day travel forecast, and the data just hasn't been readily available for us to push one out. But we're getting to a point where we are confident in the economic data that's being provided to us. And we do plan on having a Q3 report, so reflective of July through September in terms of travel volume, where we expect people to travel, potentially in terms of road trips, not necessarily air travel. There's not a lot of data there right now. But yes, AAA will continue to provide this information to consumers, whether it's through our travel restrictions map at triptych.aaa.com, lots of information on our planning site within AAA.com. We're here for people, and we are your trusted source when it comes to traveling. And of course, automotive too, and so many other things.
And on Friday, I sat down with LinkedIn's Devin Banerjee to talk about the potential for retirement woes. Let's take a look.
Yeah, look, Jeff, you and I have talked about what the markets have been doing the past few weeks and months. And, I talk about it with my friends a lot, my colleagues. And for those of us who are in our 30s or 40s, or even people in their 20s, it's fun to talk about these things, to track it, to have intellectual debates. But honestly, we are 30, 40 years away from retirement in the cases of those age groups I mentioned. And there's this real interesting conversation coming out and data coming out about those who are really close to retirement and what kinds of actions they've been taking during this period. So for those approaching retirement, they've also approached this really difficult investment decision, which is waiting out a rebound or beginning to exit the market. And it's really putting on display a lot of behavioral biases and a lot of kind of quirks around trying to time the market that we all know are bad for us and that we should not be following, but really get put on full display during periods of crisis and uncertainty. Mm-hmm. So one of the most circulated things I've seen on financial Twitter and on LinkedIn as well is this data coming out from Fidelity this past week, which found that 1/3 of investors above the age of 65 actually sold all of their equity holdings in the period February 20th to May 15th. A third of them basically exited the stock market. That compared with about 18%, which I personally still think is quite high for investors across all age groups. Now, of course, professional financial planners, professional financial advisors I would venture to say would never recommend making such a drastic move anytime. Often they're recommending gradually reducing your exposure to more risky assets like stocks as you approach retirement, while increasing your exposure to less risky investments like government bonds, for example. But this is really putting on display those behavioral biases like loss aversion, which is when people tend to prefer avoiding losses over acquiring an equivalent level of gain. So they'd rather not lose another 5, 10, 20% of their invested capital. They'd rather not lose that than gain even that same amount. So again, the data is starting to show that people are acting quite emotionally, which I think you and I spoke about in March when the markets were really gyrating the most. The top advice that we were gathering on LinkedIn from certified planners and financial advisors, and number one is not to panic. It's to sit back and accept that what's happening is a regular occurrence every cycle, and to put that put those immediate worries away and to start thinking through your larger plan. And so, unfortunately, we're just seeing those behavioral biases on full display right now. I mean, different data sources, providers, and their methodologies are always worth questioning. And it's hard to, even when it's statistically significant and done robustly, it is hard to think about that sample representing perfectly the larger population. But I would say these emotional reactions and behavioral biases we do see on full display all the time, anecdotally, and people talking about how they should try to time the market. It's just one of the most constants in life, basically. And I would just say statistically, it's always in hindsight when you see and realize that a long-term perspective would have benefited you the most. And so another of the most circulated things I've seen on financial social media this week was Vanguard putting out its latest 10-year forecasts based on its capital markets model. So it does this every now and then, but it really got picked up this week because it was showing U.S. equities with a 5 to 8% annualized return over the next, and of course these are all just projections based on inputs in its model, but 5 to 8% projected annually for U.S. equities, 8 to 11% for global equities ex-U.S., compared to 1 to 2% for U.S. bonds, or treasuries, of course, just 0.4 to 1.4%. And so even if the markets are reapproaching all-time highs, which they actually did earlier this week, I mean, many of the models are still showing, mid-single-digit percentage to high single-digit percentage annual returns, in equities. And of course, that's going to gyrate, in between the years. But it's only, as I said, in hindsight, when you look back over the cycle, that you realize if you did exit early, you realize that it was possibly a mistake. For those of us who do try to educate ourselves, who are aware of these data points, these statistics, and these behavioral traps, but for many ordinary folks who have the ability to control how their retirement is allocated and invested, they're not so educated, not by any fault of their own, but they have other careers, other jobs, and maybe they've never learned that from their employer or their plan provider or in school. Back in the day, back in college or in high schools. So I'm a big proponent of even more financial education for people in high schools and in core college curricula.
That wraps up this episode of BRN Weekly. Don't forget, we're back tomorrow with the BRN Sunday podcast. I'll be joined by members of the media, academia, and financial services to analyze all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and more. We've got a very special guest. You're not going to want to miss this show. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Attention! The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has officially authorized new benefits that Medicare Advantage plans may include. To get the benefits you deserve, you can call the Medicare Coverage Helpline.
Hi, I'm Joe Namath. If you're on Medicare, this is important information. I called the Medicare Coverage Helpline and they instantly looked up my coverage. In this one simple call, they offered to enroll me in a plan that includes rides to medical appointments, private home aides, doctors and nurses' visits by telephone, and even home-delivered meals. The plan also includes dental, vision, hearing, and prescription drug coverage, all at no additional cost.
Don't delay. Call to see if the new benefits are available in your area.
Call the number on your screen now. It's free.
Call 1-800-757-1451. That's 1-800-757-1451.